Welcome to the next gen web track in Augustus 5 and 6. Presenting today will be Matt Johansson together with Kyle Osborne. They'll be talking about hacking the Google Chrome OS. I think a very timely talk. Let the gentlemen introduce the rest of themselves. Enjoy the talk.
Thank you, Case. So I'm Matt Johansson. This is Kyle Osborne. We both work for BlackHat Security. We're both application security professionals for the Threat Research Center there. I was an engineer turned team lead. Kyle?
I'm an AppSec specialist. My primary focus is on offensive security, and I'm the sort of guy that likes to push the big red button to see what happens.
So yeah, as I said, we work for the Threat Research Center. We're part of a team of 30-plus people who are responsible for staying on top of the latest web hacking trends in the world to kind of benefit our clients from our hacking services. We sit behind our Sentinel service, which came out in 2003. It's a website vulnerability assessment and management system. And we also perform the business logic and manual assessments on the thousands of websites that are under service. So that's our little company preview. Let's get right into it, though. So this is what started the whole shebang. Kyle's got it here. This is Google CR48. This was the beta laptop back in the fall of 2010 when this came out. And it was the first device that was actually dedicated to Chrome operating system. Before this, ChromeOS was out as an open source project. You can try to install it on a virtual machine or a machine of your own, but this was the first device that actually came pre-installed on and utilized a lot of the features that Google put in place, especially some of the security features. Google came to us as kind of industry experts in the field at BlackHat to try to get a unique perspective on what we could find, and we wouldn't be here if we didn't find stuff. So let's talk about what we know about Chrome operating system, right? We were kind of surprised when we first opened it up. It's just Chrome. It's just the browser. You know, I'm sure a bunch of people in the room use Chrome browser. That's all that's on this machine. When we logged into the laptop, in order to log in, you needed to log in with your Google account. So you're authenticated your Google account. It's got built-in Wi-Fi and 3G. It's just the browser. Because of this, nothing is stored locally, right? You don't have access to the hard drive at all. There is no real software that you can install on it. It's pretty much a lockdown device. And this is kind of Google's push towards using everything in the cloud, right? Cloud reliant, but pretty heavy cloud stuff. You're using your Google Docs instead of your Microsoft Offices. You're going to be using your online email instead of your local Outlook. You're going to be storing anything in cloud storage instead of on your hard drive. And because of all this, it's very fast, very, very fast. So another thing to keep in mind here is this is no longer a beta project. The CR48 that was kind of a beta device, but these are actually on the market now. Samsung has put them out as Chromebooks. They're about $500, and this is kind of what Google's putting up against the Apples of the world, right? This is their trump card here that they think might actually steal a chunk of the marketplace the same way the iPad did. It's a totally web-based operating system, but with a keyboard, right? Other than that, it's kind of just like a lot of the other web-based tablets and things like that out there. So the analogy that we like to make is that it's very much like your mobile devices. Everyone has had a smartphone at some point. I'm sure a very, very large percentage of the people in the room are using either an iPhone or an Android phone right now. And these devices are pretty locked down unless you jailbreak them. And in order to get the functionality out of this lockdown device, you're going to need to download these apps that are available to you. Anything that's available to you to get any more functionality out of it than just a phone, right? And I think some people with iPhones might claim that it might not actually be a very good phone device anyway. But these apps, that's what's available to you in the App Store to just kind of install and get any more functionality out of it. It's kind of the same way with these Chromebooks, right? If you want more than a web browser on this device, you're going to need to install extensions. You're going to need to install browser extensions that will kind of increase the functionality and the usability of this device, of this little netbook. This is significant because now you need to worry about the mindset of the people who are developing these extensions. The other important thing here is a lot of these extensions are third-party developer developed, right? They're just put on the Chrome Web Store the same way that apps are put on the Apple App Store. This can just be anybody.
Right, another thing to emphasize with this is because Google is actually putting out this ChromeOS operating system, they're very much emphasizing removing the desktop from the desktop operating system. It is just a web browser. There is no other programs besides what you can run in a web browser. And unlike Apple's App Store, there is no review process currently in place with the Chrome Web Store. So basically, everything you get from the Chrome Web Store is taken directly from the developer and made available to you from a supposedly trusted service such as Google. It's kind of can be kind of a problem.
We actually saw an extension that was live in the web store for download called Cookie Stealer, and it did exactly that. It wasn't developed by us, but it had the check mark verified as absolutely secure and safe. The other correlation here is the same way that when you install an app on your phone, it pops up and tells you what that app is going to have permission to, right? So when you install an app, it's going to say, hey, this is going to have permission to X, Y, Z. The Chrome extensions, instead of having permissions to, say, your GPS location, your call history, text messages, these extensions are going to have access to talk to different websites, right? So what websites can this extension actually talk to besides itself? So what does a hacker see, right? We're going to look at this, especially us web hackers, and this is just a juicy new attack surface, right? This is a very target-rich environment. A lot of the extensions, the Chrome extensions especially, are just mini web applications. They're just to help get more usability out of this device. We're going to talk about a few extensions in a second that literally ran as little mini websites. So we were able to find some of the web application vulnerabilities that we've been looking for years, that everyone knows about. The difference between this and other browsers is just that these Chrome extensions are actually web applications rather than something like a Firefox extension, which is probably a little bit more, or an add-on, is a little bit more software-like. You're installing it on the machine. It's not necessarily, it doesn't act like a web application at all. Something like a NoScript, you're installing it, it's changing something in your browser. These aren't doing that. At least the ones that we're playing with, they're just mini websites. So let's get right into it, right? This is the extension that, the first vulnerability that we found. It's actually the first extension I even tested for anything on this CR48. So within, I'd say, half an hour of opening this computer, I found this bug. I didn't realize what I had found maybe for another day or two, but it was within a matter of minutes. So it was pre-installed. It's one of the very few pre-installed extensions on the CR48 and now on the Chromebooks. And it was just a simple note-taking app, right? It's just a little Post-it note. It takes up very little screen real estate on your screen, which is very important on these little netbooks, right? So all it is going to be your to-do list or whatever you're going to write, and it's going to, another feature, the main feature of it, is going to sync to your Google Docs account. So that's going to happen automatically every few seconds to a folder called Scratchpad. A side feature of Google Docs that we're going to use in our exploit here is that you can actually share documents and folders with each other on Google Docs. Me and Kyle were laughing about it when we were writing up all the stuff and information for this hack. We were actually using Google Docs and sharing documents with each other, even though we were exploiting vulnerabilities in it. Another side feature, though, of Google Docs, which makes this exploit pretty unique, is that you can actually, the person receiving that document or folder does not need to give permission to receive that document or folder. They just get it. And there's also a nice little checkbox that you're going to see that we can actually turn off the email notification to even let them know that they got it. So not only do they not need to tell you that it happened, they could just not know that it happened at all. So the three key points here is everyone has it. It's pre-installed, right? So everyone who's using this device has it. When we tested this, you'll see in the video that we have, when we tested this, it had 30,000 users. That was back in the fall of 2010 when these were first coming out. You must be authenticated to your Google account to use its functionality, right? So it's going to be syncing to your Google Docs account. You're authenticated. And most interestingly, Google doesn't require permission for you to receive any documents or folders or anything like that. So the question you guys should be asking yourself is, what kind of things could someone be sharing with me without my permission? So we're going to get right into the first demo here that started this whole project.
All right, so here's the Scratchpad entry in the web store. So as you can see, it has about 30,000 users as of fall 2010. So we're going to go ahead and actually create a note in Scratchpad to demonstrate the syncing feature of a regular user.
This is the intended functionality here, right? This is what a normal user would be doing. This happens to be our victim's Gmail account.
So there's our hello world, which is synced right there. So we'll go ahead and then move over to an attacker, and an attacker will actually have a document with a title that contains HTML and JavaScript. This is properly sanitized in the context of Google.com, so there's really no vulnerability here. There's nothing wrong with this document at all. It's a completely sane document. But
so, yeah, if you see in the title right here, this is our XSS injection, right? We're going to use an on-mouse over event to actually fire our JavaScript and call an external JavaScript file. This is it right here real quick. And then that's going to load in the victims extension once we actually share this folder called Scratchpad.
Right. So we're going to go ahead and share the folder. Now, the key point here is that we are sharing the folder named Scratchpad. This is important because when you share a folder, you actually share the whole folder. So they actually get another folder in their documents named Scratchpad. So right here, we're going to go ahead and paste it in there and then uncheck that little box that said send the victim a notification, because we don't want them to know. So we went in and looks like it's shared. All right, now in just a second, Scratchpad is actually going to automatically sync to this shared document. We can see under here we actually have documents shared, a folder named Scratchpad, and there's our inject. No notification or asking for authorization, and now our inject has actually appeared right there.
So the other important thing to note here is, like I said, we're using an on-mouse over event. This is just for demonstration purposes. In a second, Kyle's going to hit play, and we're going to mouse over this actual injection, and it's going to create some buttons, right? We just use JavaScript to create buttons. This is just for the demo. This all could have happened automatically, instantly, and silently, right?
Right.
So then the other kind of thing to note, we're going to talk about permissions in a second, but this Scratchpad extension actually only has permissions to talk to www.google.com and docs.google.com. You would have seen that on the web store and right before you click install, but this was pre-installed, so you wouldn't even know what permissions this had.
Right. So because it has access to www.google.com, we can access pretty much anything under that domain, which includes things such as your Google contacts, or your Google Voice account, which includes all of your text messages and call history. So here we've actually created a quick little inject which will grab and download your Google contacts. So we'll go ahead and click the button, and this basically uses the export functionality of the account that you're logged into to download your Google contacts in CSV format. So that's the victim's contacts, and we can actually export that very easily. It's trivial to exfiltrate that from an extension.
They put it in CSV format, which is nice and parsable for us.
Oh, absolutely.
So the cool thing here about getting every contact in the victim's email box is that we can take all these email addresses and share the same document to all of them, right? So this is potentially a zero-click, tops one-click worm, right? One click would be to open the Scratchpad extension. Otherwise, it just would happen silently, automatically.
It'd be very trivial just to grab every email you have, spam it out to everyone, and then continue with that process.
Exponentially,
Yep. And with doing that, grab all their contacts and steal their information. So another inject we made, because it has access to www.google.com and docs.google.com, we can actually inject JavaScript into those websites or into those domains. So because of the functionality, the API, which we'll go over in a bit, we can exploit a website that doesn't have any exploits. We can inject our own JavaScript and more or less create XSS bugs.
Yeah, these exploits had the extensions have a pretty nifty function called execute script.
Yep.
So
execute script tab ID, code you want to execute.
So we just were able to.
So in this case, we're actually just alerting your cookies, which in this case if we were an attacker, we wouldn't need to do this. We can just go ahead and pop the box, inject the JavaScript, export your cookies, and then send your cookies back to us, and suddenly we are in your Gmail session, in your Google session. And
so not only was it a zero-click worm, it's a zero-click worm that anyone who was using Scratchpad who received that, we stole their Google account. All of their email, all their documents, all their text messages and call history on Google Voice, yep. Their Android phone, whatever it was, right? So anyone who would have gotten this, again, silently and not knowing it, we would have been able to steal their Google account. So you noticed that this was a video, right? So Google was actually really good about this and fixed the cross-site scripting. This extension, luckily, was developed by Google, right? Scratchpad actually was developed by Google. So they were in control of the code that the cross-site scripting was actually in, so they fixed that rather quickly. But then we got to playing. We're like, okay, wait a second. So this extension only had permissions to docs.google and www.google. Let's see what some of these other extensions have permission to, and then what we can do there. And if Google has an XSS bug, what do we think the odds are of some other people having XSS bugs, right? Pretty high. So kind of just to explain how we did what we did in that Scratchpad demo, since we had permissions to those two domains, and we also, there's a list, if you guys read our white paper, there's a list of the Chrome APIs that all the extensions can actually use. And most of them have permission to an API called tabs, right? Because they're going to need to interact with some tab that is open in the browser at that moment. So the Scratchpad had docs.google, www.google, and tabs. So that's how we were able to do that. We're able to talk to any tab that is open and open any new tab that we want to. And again, just rehashing this, these permissions are set by the third-party developer. These are set by the person who just uploaded this extension. So now we really have to worry about where they are in the security mindset of things.
And again, there is no code review process immediately or at the moment. So someone can upload wide open permissions, and there is a notification saying, hey, this wants to access everything. But that's up to the user's discretion to then go, okay, and install it.
How many people in the room right now have an iPhone in their pocket at the moment? Or an Android. Okay, more hands. How many of you have installed apps on there? You've all seen the pop-up box with this app that you're about to install, this really cool Angry Birds wallpaper that you're about to install, has access to your GPS location and your text messages and your call history. How many people have hit cancel because of that pop-up box? Okay, more in this room than probably any other room that I asked that in, right? So in these extensions, that's not even actually a pop-up box, right? It's just under the install button, and it says what domains this is going to talk to. Well, of course, your note-taking Google application is going to have to talk to docs.google.com. Why would that stop you from installing anything? Of course, your banking extension that's going to help you do banking transactions is going to have to talk to your bank, right? So these are the kinds of things that we're looking for now. So the other interesting point here is that not only do we have to worry about the security mindset of developers, but certain extensions actually need absolutely wide open permissions in order to run, right? So something like an RSS feed, how is it possible to whitelist or blacklist the domains that an RSS feed is going to try to talk to? An RSS extension, right? So something that you're going to have to try to subscribe to a blog or your news article or anything like that. There's no way to guess every potential domain that is going to have an RSS feed on it. So it's going to need to be able to talk to everything on the internet, right? So we've actually found some of these extensions out in the wild that have absolutely wide open permissions, *:// right? And so they're able to talk to everything. So that's kind of what we're talking about here.
So a quick review of the extensions that, as an attacker, I find very interesting. So we've got bookmarks, cookies, and history APIs. So basically, these all allow you to add, edit, delete, view all the bookmark, cookies, and histories that you have. This is great because now I don't have to inject JavaScript into Google.com. I can take it directly from the cookies API. It's trivial. It's a simple call that basically is grab cookies from this domain, or you can even do grab all cookies, and then you can simply export that out and send them back to the attacker, and you've got all of your cookies. And this doesn't even protect against the cookies with the secure bits and the HTTP only that JavaScript's not able to access, because this is actually a direct call from the API telling telling the browser to give the extension the cookies it wants. The two others that are really interesting, as Matt mentioned, is the Windows and Tabs API. That basically lets you control windows and tabs in the browser. You can you can move stuff around and modify the tabs. You can watch them and all that. But there's also a neat little function called execute script, which we mentioned earlier, which actually lets us execute JavaScript inside any tab we want, given the permission from the URL match pattern.
So these windows and tabs, that doesn't mean that we actually have to pop these up and open them and do anything. We can do pop unders if we want, or we can just talk to what's open.
And we can even watch tabs as you open them. We can set a listener to go on open. If you connect to this website, load this script up inside the website. So if we see you going to bankofamerica.com, we can simply just have a routine for bankofamerica.com and inject that JavaScript as necessary.
Whenever the user actually does open it.
We can watch you close tabs and then reopen them for you.
How nice of us.
Yes.
So the other cool thing here is that this screenshot is actually a screenshot of the file that these permissions are set in. It's called the manifest.json. We were playing a little play with words, manifest.json destiny, right? This new frontier, whatever. So this screenshot is actually of an actual extension. That's what it has permissions to, and you can see the tabs API in the bottom. Right, so this one doesn't have permission to any domains, but any notifications, any storage on the hard drive, the favicon in Chrome, and the tabs. So again, the match of the URL would be the *:/*/path, right? So we've seen extensions in the wild with XSS bugs in them set as *:/**.
A discerning amount of extensions that have this don't actually require it. You'll find random things that don't really need any interaction with websites, or only need interaction with a few specific websites that are kind of abusing this, because there are other ways that a developer can inject script into a website without actually including this and make their extension interactable. So it's kind of a cheating method. It's just easiest thing to do, throw it in there, who cares if it's secure.
So the other important thing to note about the star before the :// that should mean any protocol. It actually just means HTTP or HTTPS. Right? It doesn't mean that we can all of a sudden open FTP connections and do
or
whatever
file : //
or file, yeah. That in the very initial release of ChromeOS, we were able to do file : // but as soon as we updated it, that day that we updated it, we were no longer able to access the local file system. So kind of what we've been saying this whole time, right? We're not looking for the same usual suspects, right? We're not going to be looking for the software that everyone's been exploiting for all these years. We're not going to be looking for the new Flash or Microsoft Office buffer overflow or anything like that to try to propagate malware or build a botnet or anything like that, right? So these are the new usual suspects for us, at least in the web hacker's mind, right? We're looking for things like the RSS readers, which absolutely need wide open permissions in order to run. If those have a cross-site scripting bug in them, it's game over, right? Mail notifiers, right? So something that goes and grabs your email from somewhere and displays the subject line in your browser, like, oh, thanks, and then I can click on it and open my email. Note takers like Scratchpad. Basically anything that takes input from anywhere and displays it on the screen, we're going to be looking for cross-site scripting bugs. Any extension that's going to go and talk to a database, we have a demo with one of those, we're going to look for the SQL injections of the world. Anything that's going to go ahead and perform an administrative function for you, something business sensitive, we're going to be looking if we can CSRF it, right? This is the web hacker's mindset. We don't care about this access to the hard drive that's so limited. We could care less about what's on there, right? And the other cool thing here is that an XSS vuln, like that we find every day at BlackHat, right? We find them every day. They're everywhere. It's the most widespread web application vulnerability out there. When you find an XSS vuln on that website, contrary to what the name cross-site scripting says, you're going to attack the users of that website, right? If you find cross-site scripting vuln on an extension, you can potentially attack the users of any website. That's what makes this completely new and different. This is unprecedented. So then I have a nice picture of Kyle on this slide.
Thank you.
It's a direct quote from the internet, so we know it's real, right?
I think I said that before, actually.
This small child can code JavaScript. So why are we going to be worrying about this native code execution, right? Everything that I just talked about, right? That stuff is hard, right? I don't want to worry about writing these overflows and underflows and, do all this reverse engineering and spend years learning assembly and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to write JavaScript because it's the absolute easiest thing that I can do as a web hacker in order to exploit some sort of vuln, right? So this XSS, this simple, just plain vanilla cross-site scripting gives us everything that we could possibly want, right? All the information is in the browser.
Right, it's actually, because JavaScript is really easy, the learning curve for any of these exploits is pretty low. I mean, if you've ever popped XSS in any website, you can do it in these extensions, but the impact is much, much higher than anything we've ever seen before. I mean, you can't do this stuff in a website. You can't attack other websites with cross-site scripting. Exactly.
So at the executive briefings yesterday, someone brought up that bugs being sold kind of on the market, right? That mobile bugs are being sold for actually 20 to 30% more than desktop bugs nowadays. Because if you own someone's phone, you own their whole life, right? That's the mindset. That's why people are buying these crazy mobile exploits, right? This is the easiest exploit. I mean, if I can go and sell that JavaScript that we just wrote for Scratchpad for 80 grand on the black market, right? Compared to what you would be buying for a desktop bug nowadays. That shift right there is showing the importance, the change of importance here. We're not worried about what you're storing on your hard drive anymore. I could care less about your computing power. That's not what web hackers care about. Oh, and the other thing that's completely new here is that in cross-site scripting, in normal cross-site scripting in web applications, what we talk to our clients about is input validation and output encoding, right? Those things all happen server-side. That's something that our clients can actually fix and do better. These extensions and stuff like that, the encoding must happen client-side, right? All this input validation is now client-side, which we've never seen before. Right, so this cross-site scripting is actually local on your machine in your extension. It's being fired in an extension that's installed on your machine. That, it's not coming from the server. That encoding is completely different. You would have to output encode client-side. That's never been seen before. So let's go to another cool demo. So we've gone ahead and wrote a purposely malicious extension just for demonstration purposes. With wide open permissions. Like we said, there are extensions out there in the wild with wide open permissions and XSS bugs. We got away with all that and made it really easy to tell what we were doing. So do you want to go ahead and
just take this.
Cool. Go ahead.
Great. So we've, like I said, or like Matt has said, we've created this extension right here, conveniently named malicious extension to, so we don't forget which one it is. So
that Google doesn't accidentally upload it to the web store.
Oh.
So we actually did upload this to the web store. It was available for download.
I wanted to make sure that I wanted to see if there was anything that would actually prevent me from uploading an extension that had every single possible API available with full, doors open.
With no legitimate purpose whatsoever.
No legitimate purpose. I think it was even named malicious app on the web store. But it went through. I removed it immediately. I only let a few people download it. All right, so first we'll go ahead and go with XHR scan.
Let's do that last.
I'm not actually going to click it.
Okay.
So because we are on a local area network, but we're not actually going to be scanning. So this is basically just a port scan. We're doing a port scan from your web browser using XML HTTP requests. That's basically like the fundamentals of all the fancy JavaScript in every website, sort of loading stuff on the page while the page is remaining static. So because we have access to pretty much anything, */ whatever, I can start scanning IP addresses in your subnet. I can make requests to every single IP in your subnet with port 80, and I can tell if it's open. JavaScript will actually, depending on the ready state, it'll actually tell you if it's up, but it's not listening on a port. So I can tell if a machine is up, even if it's not listening on port 80. And then I can even get the response back from the port 80 request, so I can actually pull the page. So I can pull down your router's page, or I can pull down your local internal networks page, including such as stuff like if you have code repositories at work or time logs or anything that's hosted on port 80. And it's not just port 80. I can change the port around to look for other sensitive things.
So the important thing to note here is this is happening via the web, via an extension behind your firewall. Right? This is a port scan. We're going to get this information. We're going to display it on the screen if we actually, I don't know, we probably shouldn't push the button, but it just displays on the screen here with this button, but we could actually just get that sent back to us and be like, okay, here's a nice list of IP addresses that are on your network, right?
Right. So, and it's actually very fast. You can scan 250 IPs like that, just asynchronous XHR requests. It's very quick. I don't know. Hold
on. It crashed my Mac last night when we did it.
It actually made the Mac kernel panic, and we'll look at it later. Maybe.
We'll push it after the last demo, I promise.
Yeah. So another one we already showed you, grab Google Contacts. That'll just go in and actually grab your Google Contacts. So there's
you know John
there.
Smith? That's crazy.
Yeah, dude, do you know John Smith too?
Yeah. Cool. All right, so we did that one already.
Yeah, so we did that.
So next, okay. I want some audience participation on this one. Who here in the front wants to come up here and give us their phone number? Joe, I choose you. Come on.
Come on, Joe. Joe, I have your number right here.
We're going to do it. Yeah.
All right, so basically what we're doing here is we're going to use your logged in Google session to send a text message with your Google Voice session. So we're just making a valid request to Google Voice to send a text message to someone. And this can all be automated. We can just inject this code and pull down your contact list and then text message everybody in your contact list or text message whoever we want. We can spam people, we can do whatever with your Google account. It's almost like CSRFing your Google Voice account on Google Voice website.
I mean, this is the cool thing about cross-site scripting. If we find cross-site scripting somewhere, all CSRF protections are null and void, right? You get the response, you can parse it for that CSRF token, right? We just regex the Google Voice response for their CSRF token and just included it on the fly in what we got. So I think Kyle is going to send Joe a text message.
We put it in password field, Joe, so people wouldn't know your number. But if you want me to say it out loud, I can. There. So it should be coming to you in just a second.
This is all demonstration purposes. This is like, say we're going to picture that this extension is running on a victim's machine, right? We hacked someone's, hacked an extension that's installed on a victim. They're authenticated to their Google account, and we went ahead and ran all this JavaScript.
So not only that, too.
Did you get it? Yeah,
nice.
He got the text message, okay.
So we can actually also like initiate calls. So if we know you really hate someone, we could have you call them. And then when you pick up the phone, it'll start ringing. And then they pick up the phone, and they're like, hey, what's up? Why'd you call me? Why'd you call me?
Dude, what's mine say?
So another one we're going to show is we're also going to do, it's a similar one as the Scratchpad one. Unlike the Scratchpad one, this one can inject JavaScript into any website. So we're going to go ahead and do this. So here we've got injected JavaScript into Facebook.com, Google.com, Yahoo.com, Chase.com, and Twitter.com. So that's no vulnerabilities in those websites that we know of, but we were able to inject our code. So instead of doing alert, why don't we just inject a keylogger? Suddenly, we have your passwords because you thought, oh, look at...
Who cares about the keylogger? Just grab that cookie and go change the password yourself, right? So like all of that, we just injected JavaScript on every website, or any website that we could think of, right? Because this extension had permission. And again, there were extensions in the wild that had these permission levels and actually had cross-site scripting developments that we were able to do this in, which is really cool.
We're actually going to go over another one which I think really emphasized the threat of this. Having your bank account information is great. I really want your money, so it works out. But we're going to own the unownable. So LastPass is a great tool. It's a password management tool. It syncs across across their servers. It encrypts your database client side so they never see any of your passwords. Do any of you use LastPass in here?
A number of you. Okay.
Great, I'm
cool.
targeting a few of these. I'm writing your name down.
We have an extension we'd like you to install.
Right. So there's no vulnerability, as is. There was a vulnerability when I was playing with it, cross-site scripting error. They fixed it immediately, and they've actually been very helpful with us, and they've actually given us a few ideas on how we can, how they can protect their website from this sort of attack. So basically, I'm going to find a vulnerability in Joe Schmo RSS Reader.
It's a popular one.
It is a popular one. I'm going to go ahead and just inject this code, which will look through your history and your bookmarks to see if you have LastPass. I can also tell if you have the LastPass extension installed. And then I'm going to spawn a new window with LastPass.com. Now, some functionality that the LastPass extension adds is that if you're authorized or authenticated to the LastPass extension, which if you're browsing the web, you're probably going to be authenticated. It's probably going to be the little red check mark up there.
For those of you who don't use LastPass, it's a password manager, right? So we as security people are always telling people that you need to use a different password for every one of your services ever online, and anything locally, forget about it, it better be different, right? So LastPass kind of makes that a little bit more user-friendly. You make one password for LastPass, it generates passwords for all your other online accounts, and will actually auto configure that. They store all the passwords encrypted locally. You have a local crypto key. It's actually handled very securely. It's a great tool. Kyle used it. That's why he decided to try to hack it.
When I was actually looking for vulnerabilities in LastPass and found one and they fixed it, I actually realized we can leverage that into hidden functionality of the LastPass extension. So if you're authenticated to LastPass and I spawn a tab to LastPass.com and it auto logs you in, that means that I have your crypto key in LastPass.com tab. So then I can just inject some JavaScript into that tab and steal your crypto key, which was provided by your LastPass extension, which we didn't touch the LastPass extension at all. We just simply utilized the feature of it. And then on top of that, we can go ahead and just grab your database, which is provided in a nice XML format, which we can then decode our site after exporting it to us. So this is not a vulnerability in LastPass. There's really no known method that they can use to protect themselves against this. It's just kind of a very tough issue. So we're going to actually go ahead and demonstrate that.
So the only thing that they did when we were talking to them about this, they were actually super responsive. They thought it was a really cool bug. And the thing that they did to kind of make this a little bit harder, it's not undoable, a little bit harder, is that they will not auto-authenticate you to LastPass.com if you are authenticated to your LastPass extension, right? They'll make you log in again. But if you were logged into LastPass.com, this would still work just like any other website, right? We would still be able to inject JavaScript and do everything that we did.
Like I mentioned earlier with Bank of America as an example, we can just wait for you to open your LastPass tab and then inject JavaScript. We don't need to do this. This is just making the attack very quick and seamless. We don't even have to worry about it. So this is your LastPass vault in the extension. As you can see, we're logged in and we have Google.com and generic bank.
I love them.
Yeah, best bank ever. So we're going to go ahead and grab the LastPass database. So what it's going to do is it's going to open up LastPad. It automatically logs you into their web vault. It's going to inject some JavaScript to grab your local key. I had to export data like this. It's kind of a tricky.
This isn't a video. You know, we're doing this live. The wait time in between is actually a JavaScript timeout thing that we did.
So this is actually my LastPass database that I just exported and decrypted on the fly. So you got the bank, the username, password. Dang it, I forgot to change that.
I love you too.
URL and all that. Like, I've just flat out exported your database and I have it. Not only do I have your database, I have your crypto key. So I don't even have to do any of the decrypting on your side. I have all the keys necessary to pretty much own everything. And I don't know about you guys that use LastPass, but I've been using it for about 2 months, and I already have over 50 websites that I use regularly and have sensitive information on it. No, we haven't. We've only looked at LastPass because that's actually what I use. All right. And like everything else, that can all be done pretty seamlessly. There are some kind of, you've got to wait for the page to load and then inject the JavaScript, but it we can load it in the background with a window in the background and then connect to that tab. It's pretty, it can be pretty slick.
And of course, the last step, profit, right?
Yeah, because I have your bank account, so I profit.
So how do we make this really, really easy? How many, just kind of for my own curiosity, how many people in the room are familiar with Beef, the tool? Ooh, okay, more than I thought. Very nice. So what Beef is just the browser exploitation framework, for those of you who don't know. It just makes our life as web hackers really easy and makes the lives of victims really bad. Right, so it's basically a good analogy. Everyone's familiar with Metasploit. I'm assuming most of the people are familiar in this room are familiar with Metasploit. It's the Metasploit of the web, right? So it's going to have a list of modules for browser exploitations or payloads, and we're going to use that to maintain persistent control of victims of our cross-site scripting attacks.
So because these extensions are just web pages and suffer the same vulnerabilities and they have JavaScript and all that, so instead of attacking a website with Beef, I'm just going to hook Beef into the extension. This is great because Beef maintains persistence by pinging back and forth, so I don't have to do like a hope for my first JavaScript execute running properly and then wait for them to click it again or wait for it to load again or whatever. I have a consistent access to this, this session that I've injected, and I can just inject code as I feel. And on top of that, say you have an extension like LastPass that opened up that window, I can actually put Beef in the background because most of these extensions have a background running process like RSS Reader or LastPass. They check against RSS feeds or your database to see if there's updates, so something has got to be running in the background. So the cool thing about that is that if I hook Beef into the background process, the only way you can get rid of it is fully closing and killing your process of Chrome. Otherwise, it'll just remain there constantly. And then on top of that, we can replay commands as necessary. So I've went ahead and put together a few Beef extensions, which will just mostly kind of not too fancy, but we've got a few things like if you're able to own an extension that you're not really familiar with the extension and you don't want to go and look it up, you can just hit the check permissions button, and what that'll do is that'll actually run JavaScript in the extension, which returns with all the permissions that it has.
So all the extensions that we were playing around with and hacking, we had installed locally, and we were able to just pull up the manifest.json file, which had the permissions in it. Say, for some reason, you're super awesome, and you found a cross-site scripting hole in extension that you weren't familiar with, this would just ping you back with those permissions so you would know what you could do with it.
Right, and then we have the execute tabs module, which will basically just execute any JavaScript you want onto all the tabs. That's great if you just want to inject maybe a keylogger into every single tab that the user currently has open. And then we have inject Beef. So I kind of like to say, yo dog, I heard you like beef, so we put beef in your beef so you could beef while you beef. Basically, if you're in Beef, you can inject Beef into all of the open tabs. So not only do you have Beef in that extension, you can inject Beef into bankofamerica.com. And by doing that, you have a separate session that you can use to better manage your exploits or attacks against the user when they're on bankofamerica.com.
We're all about making things easy.
Yeah, dude. I'm lazy, so it works out. And then we have Portscan, which basically does the same functionality as what we may or may not demonstrate in a few minutes. And then send Google Voice SMS, same sort of deal. I just basically took all the functionality from the malicious app and compacted them into modules. But it's so easy to use the API that you could use so much more. I mean, it's very, as long as you know a little bit of JavaScript and you know how to make XHR requests, I can pull down your Google, your Gmail, or your mail, all that simply. Like it's trivial.
So just to bring it back to what we're talking about here, right? So the software security model that we've been dealing with for decades now, that Windows and Apple have been dealing with forever, is now, it kind of is the same exact thing, just reframed. It's moved to the cloud, right? So like we were saying, there's none of the usual suspects, none of the applications that you're going to be installing or software that you're going to be installing on your Windows machine or anything like that are things that we're going to be looking for. We're going to be looking for these new juicy extensions. This is, again, Google's push towards the future. This is what they think is coming next, right? In a few years, we could all have web operating system-based machines, and they could sneak their way into the market, right? So these exploits look completely different, and the target's not your hard drive or your CPU power, but your information is what we really care about, right? So if you're logged into your bank, your social network, and your email account, and all this stuff, why do I care about what's stored on your hard drive? What am I looking for? Your social security number to top things off? Like, because you're storing a W-9, you're probably storing that in Google Docs now, right? Or you emailed your accountant.
Or you have your social security number in your LastPass database.
Yeah, well, yeah. Or you're using your AOL account to email your CPA, right? So this is the information that we're looking for now. We're using XSS in ways that have never really been utilized before, even though it's the most widely spread web vulnerability out there. This is completely brand new, and we're not really looking for any of that old stuff.
Right. And as I mentioned earlier, Google with this ChromeOS has really taken away the desktop from the desktop operating system. So what all these extensions do are they're basically rebuilding the functionality that you're used to. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go out and download anything that you think you would generally or regularly use without really thinking about it or whatever the top rated extension is, and just grab it.
I think the RSS reader that we did find an XSS hole in months ago was actually the top used RSS reader in the web store at the moment.
It actually has two parts to it. There's the main RSS reader extension, and then there's an add-on which adds a drop-down button to look for RSS feeds on the page. Both have the same permissions, wide open, and both are very vulnerable. And literally one click, oh look, you have an RSS feed that is iframe, oh look, JavaScript, and oh, my Google contacts are gone.
Yeah, thanks for subscribing to my blog. It's called Kyle quotes less than sign, greater than sign, script tag. You're owned, right? So I hope you enjoy reading what we have. So let's talk about what some things that Google have done right. We're not up here to bash Google. They've actually been great to work with. They have a few choice nicknames for me nowadays, but we're not going to say them on stage. But let's talk about some of the things that they've done right and kind of why those things didn't really protect against what we were talking about here, right? So whenever I'm talking to anyone about what we have been researching, one of the very first questions they ask me is, what about the sandbox, right? I hear about this sandbox all the time, Google Chrome sandbox. I hear about this thing that no one even showed up to CanSec West for the $20,000 bounty to even challenge, right? So the thing that's cool about these extensions is they kind of live outside the sandbox. So what the sandbox does is stop communication between tabs. So if this tab is sandbox from this tab, and it also stops communication from that tab to your local machine, right? Which will stop a lot of modern malware, viruses, and things like that in an automated web fashion. But these extensions actually control the intertabular communication on their own, right? I just made that word up, and it's awesome. So, these extensions, with their permissions, we can talk to any tab that's open with that tab's API. So even though each tab is sandbox, the extensions outside of that, we can execute JavaScript as we've seen in all of those things. Right, the things that, the other things that Chrome does awesome. Another really important thing to note here that we kind of haven't mentioned, and I know the talk is hacking Google Chrome OS, but all of these extensions are actually available for download on your Chrome browser that any of you could use on your machine today. The reason why it's kind of different and why we're focusing on Chrome OS is because this machine, you're much more likely to download these extensions on this machine because that's the only way to get functionality out of it. Right? I never really installed a Chrome extension on my desktop, but I did when I started using this thing.
On a desktop machine, Chrome is just another browser. On Chrome OS, Chrome is your desktop. So you have to make do with what you have and work with the extensions available.
So yeah, that increases the targets that we're talking about, 100-fold, right? How many people have Chromebooks yet? How many people are actually using Chrome? I think did Chrome just take over some market share or something from IE? Something like that happened recently. So again, everything that I care about is in your browser. I don't care about your hard drive. I'm not the kind of hacker to try to break the Chrome sandbox and try to get on your hard drive. I'm not smart enough, and I'm not smart enough in that, right? And I don't have to be. Like that small child said, right? All I need is JavaScript, right? I mean, it was a direct quote. It has to be true. So another very frustrating but good feature that Google put in place is that the web store is actually completely segregated from anything else. So even if your extension has wide open permissions to talk to anything on the internet, like I said, it only has HTTP or HTTPS that it can talk to. The Chrome Web Store is actually on Chrome-extension in the URI. It's completely different. It's completely segregated. So of course, one of the first things that we tried when we found a bug is, can we force someone to install a malicious extension, right? If we get our cookie stealer extension, that's not ours, but that's up there. But if we get our malicious extension up on the web store and we find a vulnerability in an extension like Scratchpad with kind of locked down permissions, right? It only had permissions to docs and www.google. Can we force install an extension that's wide open? And we couldn't. I mean, that was a thing that they thought of way before that. But a cool note is that now that new feature, we haven't played with it too much, but the new feature of the Android web store, you can actually install an app on your phone if you're on the same Google account from the computer.
There's actually a market for the Android at market.android.com. That URL is not blacklisted. If you go there, you're logged in with your Google account, you're logged into that website. So if you have your Android phone linked to that account, we can now force download and install any application we want, including an application that we purposely uploaded to then steal all of your information on your phone and track you.
So we can force install apps onto your phone.
With Google Ads, of course.
Yeah, with Google Ads.
I've got to make my money.
5 cents a click. So another idea. So like I said, we've been talking to the Google security team this whole time. They've been just great. You know, they're a few steps ahead of us with ideas of how to fix this. When we first found this, we were trying to figure out whose problem is it, right? It's not obvious right away whose problem this is. It warrants a discussion, right? So obviously the cross-site scripting bug is in the hands of whoever developed that extension, but whose problem is it with these permissions, right? Whose problem is that to solve? Is it up to the extension developer to try to think of a way to make a more restricted permission extension, or is it up to Google to think of a way to not have to have this extension use the wide open permissions? And so they're kind of ahead of us on ideas with that they thought they might be rolling out in the future. One of the ideas that just I don't know too many details on, and it isn't in production yet or anything like that. They were going to make more restrictive APIs, those Chrome APIs. They're going to make more restrictive APIs for common use cases. Something like an RSS reader, which absolutely needs access to the entire internet, they'd make an API for, so that if it got owned, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But like we said, there's extensions out there that aren't common use cases with these wide open permissions. So it would fix some things, but...
And then another thing that recently Google put out on their Chrome blog, it was actually a tip guide on how to write secure extensions. I forget his last name, Eric wrote it. Basically, it went over a bunch of cases of how not to use JavaScript in your extension. It was pretty complete. I mean, pretty much everything there we said, yeah, I mean, that's what we would take advantage of. Oh, great, write to the page directly from user input or server input. That's a terrible idea. So the first thing they actually put on that was check your permissions. Be more restrictive in your permissions. If you don't need access to every website, don't give the user or your extension access to every website. So they are starting to put some sort of awareness out there.
Yeah, this blog was just 2 weeks ago? It was about 2 weeks ago when they put this post out. I cannot say whether or not it was because we were about to talk about this, but they did post a pretty comprehensive blog post about secure extension development, which was the first of its kind. There was no other advice before this.
And the security context in the API docs is pretty thin. There's not a whole lot, at least last time I checked. A few months back, it's every once in a while there's a tidbit like, hey, you really shouldn't give this access to everything, but okay, you better understand what you're doing if you do it. And I mean, if I'm a developer, who cares? I just want it to work.
All right, that's all we got.
Anybody have?
Button.
Oh,
so
button.
is that the question? Q&A. That's the question.
You're gonna find what the IP range is.
Why? We can just push it and see what happens.
No, it's not gonna.
It'll do something, right?
No, because it's not on the same IP range. We've got to supply it. I actually have to supply it with a very short IP range. Otherwise, it's going to be scanning nothing.
So, other than the button, any other questions while everyone's filing out? Really? Everyone wants to see the button that bad?
I gotta go ahead and.
So yeah, it's hard coded into his JavaScript.
Yeah,
so
right now it's hard coded, so I'm actually just gonna go in and edit it real quick. How do I right click on Mac? Dude. Okay.
Good.
And see if anything pops up.
We pushed it. Oh, this would be lame if it didn't do anything.
Yeah, it may not.
Pray to the demo gods.
Yeah, we can actually watch it make requests. How fast it is. All right. So we'll go ahead and XHR. There we go. So it's actually. Oh, I put a space there. That's
Way to go.
My fail.
There we go. There you go.